They said, we have information that this woman works for so-and-so agency. One of our caretakers lost her husband like that. They came to her house looking for her. She was hiding in the basement. Her husband confronted the Taliban and said, my wife is a housewife. She doesn't work outside of the house. And they shot him in the head, point blank. We've been getting threats in Kunduz for years, threatening phone calls, letters. They've even come to our door to say, close down this shelter, close down your offices, and make the women stay home, otherwise we're going to kill you. But obviously we didn't listen to them.
I'm wondering if you can tell us about one woman in particular who's been singled out by Taliban commanders, and she's someone you work closely with. Her name is Dr. Hasina Sarwari. What's been her role in Kunduz?
Hasina Sarwari has been our province manager since 2010. She was the one who set up our shelters there. She was the very first people they came to look for. They invaded Kunduz at 2 a.m. At 9 a.m. they were already in her house.
So the Taliban said, and this is a quote, Hasina Sarwari herself is immoral, and if we had captured her, she would be hanged in the main circle in Kunduz city. Take us through that logic. I mean, if you're a woman and you're in a shelter for a victim of violence, you're immoral. What's the logic there?
Yes, according to them, she's encouraging women to leave their houses, their fathers and their husbands, and come to a shelter and become a prostitute. According to the Taliban, anybody who leaves their family leaves because they want to become a prostitute, and a shelter is a house of prostitution.
So have literally all the educated women in Kunduz fled?
Yes, every single educated woman, or even the uneducated women who had jobs outside of the house, have fled to Kunduz.
And we hear the Afghan government is in control again in Kunduz. Can the women who are still there come out of their homes, or is it still very risky?
It's still very risky. The Afghan government is controlling the city, but they're still fighting in the very near the districts, and the Taliban can easily come back to the city. Our province manager, Hasina, is terrified. She's still terrified for her life. She has 2 little girls, so she's terrified for them. She doesn't know if she's going to go back to Kunduz, but there are some women who are willing to go back and start working. We are Women for Afghan Women is definitely committed to going back and starting our shelters and our family guidance centers. So we will do that in due time.
I'm just curious what your reaction is to the news today that President Obama is going to keep troops in Afghanistan, in Kabul, past his term in office.
I'm very happy about that. This is what people wanted.
It's not a lot of troops, though.
No, it isn't. We definitely need more troops, but still, it's better than the 1,000 he had planned before. The fact that the Taliban now know that the U.S. isn't going anywhere, that they have the Afghan security forces back, it will definitely make an impact, and Afghans are really happy about this decision.
Manija Nadari, Director of Women for Afghan Women, speaking with me from Kabul. Thank you very much for telling us about this horrific situation in Kunduz.
Thank you for having me.
Of Ebola that's coming up on the world.
Support for the world comes from Curious.com, committed to helping people learn more than 17,000 skills like Russian, retirement planning, and rock climbing. Curious.com. Grow your skills. Learn more at Curious.com/PRI.
If you love new works in American theater, now there's Theater Lab, the new professional resident company of Florida Atlantic University with Lou Tyrell, artistic director, located on FAU's Boca Raton campus. Theater Lab at FAU features what are considered riveting new plays and astonishing new musicals. Fine wine and light dinner fare complete your theater experience at the Theater Lab Cafe. Tickets are available at Ticketmaster.com, where you can search Theater Lab at FAU. Sponsored in part by the Cultural Council of Palm Beach County.
We're funded by WLRN members and by the law firm of Diamond, Kaplan, and Rothstein, PA. Have you lost money in what was supposed to be a safe investment? Representing victims of investment fraud and stockbroker negligence, DKR's lawyers can help. Information at 305-374-1920.
The Big Friendly Giant performs at South Miami-Dade Cultural Arts Center Saturday, October 24th. You can enjoy the wacky tales of acclaimed children's author Roald Dahl as his characters come to life with giant puppets in a world of magical adventures. Tickets at smdcac.org.
I'm Marco Werman, and you're with The World. Jerusalem is, even in calm times, a divided city. Israelis live in West Jerusalem, Palestinians in East Jerusalem. But now an outbreak of violence has made people even more wary of each other. In the past month, 8 Israelis have been killed by Palestinians in a series of attacks, and 31 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces, including 14 that Israelis identified as attackers. But even with that violence, Daniel Estrin tells us there are still ties that bind the residents of Jerusalem together in surprising ways.
Take, for instance, one of Jerusalem's most beloved restaurants, Azura.
You say Azura and Jerusalem, it's like in the same breath. You know what I mean?
Moshiko Schreffler's family's been serving comfort food here since 1952. It's an Israeli-run establishment, but the people in the kitchen are Palestinian. And that's the situation with much of this city. Palestinians and Israelis have no great love for each other, but Palestinians rely on Israelis for a livelihood, and the Israeli side of town couldn't keep on ticking without Palestinians. Which brings us back to Azura. The restaurant employs 15 Palestinians. If you don't look for them, you hardly notice them. They mostly stay in the kitchen. Outside on the patio, Barbara Arama, an Israeli, eats a bowl of beef dumpling soup. You know, it's interesting, we were in the kitchen, and everyone who works in the kitchen is Palestinian from East Jerusalem.
This is what we don't understand. You walk in Israel, you have Israeli friend, and the other side, you want to kill us. It's ridiculous.
Would you be worried about eating here at this restaurant with Palestinians in the kitchen?
No, I don't think about it. If I think, I don't eat in any restaurant.
Moshiko, who helps run his father's restaurant, usually has no time to breathe, but most of the tables are empty now. He says customers are scared to eat downtown.
We throw a lot of food in the garbage the last few days.
He comes to the kitchen every morning at 5 a.m. to start rolling their signature kubed dumplings. The first Palestinian employee arrives by 6.
We don't discuss the politics in the kitchen. I have business with them. That's the way I see it. Strictly business.
Has it ever crossed your mind? Have you ever wondered?
Yeah, if somebody can attack me or something in the kitchen, it's crossed my mind. Yeah. There's some people that you can see they have like a clean heart, and you have some people that I don't know what they've been through, but you can see the hostility on their face.
Here's what one of the dishwashers went through a couple days ago. Rami Farouk says he was stopped by Israeli officers 3 times on his way to the restaurant. He says one of them threw him to the ground and told him all Arabs are terrorists. Would he rather work for Palestinians in East Jerusalem, I asked? He says Israelis pay better. A younger dishwasher, Omar Abu Sbitan, who's just 17 years old, keeps checking his iPhone. It keeps pinging with Arabic news updates about the violence. He says he supports the Palestinians who have stabbed Israelis in the past few days. He says there's no other way to liberate his country, and he would do the same. I say, really? He kind of smiles sheepishly. I ask, what about the Israelis you work for? He says, there are good Jews and there are racist Jews. There are also good Arabs and bad Arabs. Moshiko, the Israeli, comes to the kitchen window and jokes in Arabic with the Palestinian who's worked here the longest, Mossab Al-Matour. He's 31 and lives in the Shuafat refugee camp in East Jerusalem. Moshiko's not my boss, Mossab tells me. He's my brother. Mossab has visited Moshiko's family's home in West Jerusalem, and when Mossab's father died 5 years ago, Moshiko's family went to Mossab's East Jerusalem home to pay their respects. But things are different now. One of the employees is getting married this weekend in East Jerusalem. The Israeli owners probably won't be there for their own safety. The city has been taken over by a geography of fear. East is east and west is west. But in Jerusalem, the twain depend on each other. For The World, I'm Daniel Estrin in Jerusalem.
I'm Marco Werman. There's more of The World coming up in just a few minutes. Right now, we're joining with this station to ask you to support the news you rely on each day. Here's how.
Just give us a call, please, at 866-247-9576. That's 866-247-WLRN. Make a pledge online at WLRN.org. We'll give that info out again in just a moment. It's our fall membership campaign, day 2 on the air, doing very, very well. Thanks to many, many listeners throughout South Florida who've decided to become members or adding an additional contribution to their existing membership. We want you to join them, and it is about as affordable as it can get. Why? Because you set the amount you want to contribute. How does $5 a month sound? A lot of new members join at that level. Others join by paying $10 a month or more. The amount, again, is up to you, but supporting NPR News and programs like The World on WLRN is so important, but it is easy and affordable. 866-247-9576, WLRN.org. I'm Peter J., along with Jason Zabka.
Yeah, and you know, Peter, I'm willing to bet you that the idea of a world without public radio is not a pleasant one to a lot of our listeners, or if not all of our listeners. Public radio is your lifeline to what's happening in our world. All of us who work here at WLRN feel the same way, and public radio is your key to unlocking a world of knowledge and discovery. Help us bring you the public radio experience you count on each day with your own pledge at 866-247-WLRN.
We have an added incentive during this hour. Friends of ours at the Circle of Friends, which are donors that contribute a significant amount to WLRN, and set aside some funds to encourage you to make a pledge by matching your pledge dollar for dollar.
Wow.
So, yeah, if you spend $100 in support of WLRN, we get $240 worth of support in total. If you contribute $500 to WLRN, that really becomes a whopping $1,000 in support. So any amount up to $1,700 now, that's what we have left in the pool, will match your pledge dollar for dollar. So join Christine from Coconut Grove and John in Coral Gables and Peter in Miami with your pledge and have it go twice as far, but only for the next 33 minutes or so, or until we reach $1,700, whichever comes first. WLRN.org, 866-247-9576.
That is some incentive, and if that's not enough, if you make your donation now, you'll be entered for our grand prize drawing, which is a 6-night vacation for 2 people at the Aqua Wellness Resort in beautiful Nicaragua. This prize includes airfare, luxury accommodations. You get to live in a treehouse, Peter. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
In a treehouse. Daily full breakfast, $100 spa credit, and much, much more. There's no donation required, but the requirement is that you need to call 866-247-9576 or just log on to WLRN.org.
I wonder if they let you paint on the outside, no girls allowed with a Z, right?
Why would you want to do that?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. when you were 9 years old, maybe.
I suppose.
Yeah. Well, listen, lots of incentives coming your way here on WLRN, and including a ticket combo package for radio plays at the Broward Center. If you haven't witnessed a radio play live, it's quite the experience. Our crew here at WLRN is going to produce a number of them at venues throughout South Florida, including 2, the African Queen, It's a Wonderful Life and Casablanca. And you can get tickets to both of those, and a meet and greet with the cast after the show, and an autographed CD of both performances if you contribute $225 as a one-time donation right now. Just ask for the radio plays when you call 866-247-9576, 866-247-WLRN, or if you pledge online, choose that thank you gift at WLRN.org, and we do thank you. Gulliver, a private independent coeducational day school, hosts an open house breakfast for parents of students entering grades 1 through 4 on Tuesday, October 20th, and pre-kindergarten age 3 through kindergarten Wednesday, October 28th and December 2nd. This is an excellent opportunity for prospective parents to learn how Gulliver ensures a strong academic research-based curriculum within a structured framework and offers children the opportunity to grow and realize their fullest individual potential. More details at gulliverschools.org.
I'm Marco Werman. In 1938, an 80-year-old Jewish woman found out the Nazis had just arrested her only surviving son.
She put her hat on her head and said to her husband, "Come, Schatz, come, my dear. We're going to the Gestapo."
Her great-granddaughter tells us how that turned out. That's coming up on The World.
BBC News with Jerry Smith. President Obama has announced an extension to the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan, reversing a pledge to end America's longest war under his leadership. By the time Mr. Obama leaves office at the start of 2017, there'll still be about 5,000 military personnel there. He said Afghan troops were not strong enough yet to counter the increased threat from the Taliban. Investigators in Scotland and the United States say they have identified 2 new Libyan suspects in the Lockerbie bombing. The suspects are said to be linked to Abdel Basit al-Megrahi, the only person convicted of the crime. Almost 300 people died when the transatlantic flight exploded over the Scottish town in 1988. European football associations have called on FIFA to reach by mid-November a final decision over the allegations facing Michel Platini, the embattled head of their governing body UEFA. They said they supported Mr. Platini's right to clear his name. But a BBC correspondent says there are members who want to consider an alternative to him. Mr. Platini has become entangled in the scandal surrounding FIFA. The South African Parole Board says the athlete Oscar Pistorius will be released from prison next week. He'll be placed under house arrest. In October 2014, he was sentenced to 5 years in jail for killing his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp. The Kenyan Parliament has passed a controversial bill that imposes criminal penalties on journalists. They'll face jail terms of 2 years or fines of $5,000 for reporting on anything that is considered to be defamatory to Parliament. Scientists have discovered that honeybees are attracted to the caffeine that's found in many plants, and that they even seem to get addicted to it. They found that the bees who fed on the caffeinated nectar were even more likely to do a waggle dance to tell other bees where to find it. BBC News.
The World is brought to you by Public Radio International and by Soundworks.org, a collection of podcasts from PRI with global voices and perspectives. From Studio 360 to America Abroad, explore and subscribe at Soundworks.org.
I'm Marco Werman, and you're with The World. We're a co-production of the BBC World Service, PRI, and WGBH here in Boston. More than 500,000 people have crossed the Mediterranean Sea this year, trying to make it to Europe. Think about that number for a moment, and then think about what many of those people have endured. Most of them have sailed in small boats across a short stretch of water between Turkey and Greece. But the route from Libya north to Italy has been by far the riskiest. And that's put some North African fishermen on the front line of the migration crisis. Marine Olivesi met some of them in southern Tunisia.
Like any fisherman, Ahmed and his friends used to look forward to what ended up in their net. Now, they're kind of dreading it. They say their worst nightmare is to pick up a body. They've been spotting corpses at sea on an almost daily basis this season, so it's not a far-fetched scenario. These fishermen dock at a port just about 4 miles away from the Libyan border. So far this year, more than 2,800 migrants have died on their way from West Libya to Italy, according to the International Organization for Migration. That's 9 out of 10 deaths in the Mediterranean, taking place right on their turf. Every day we go out at sea and one of us will find people, they say. Some dead, some alive. We have to help, but we don't always know what to do. Should we take them on board? Should we call the police? Last week, 30 of them got some answers. The group MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, has been training local fishermen in rescue missions since July. Ahmed Roussan of MSF walks them through different scenarios. The key, he says, is to make sure migrants don't mistake the fishermen for smugglers or coast guards, so they don't feel threatened. After that, fishermen should send a distress signal. He's teaching them how.
A lot of them, they don't know even which channel to use to ask for help. So they have to know which channel to use and how to use it. To communicate very short and specific messages, clear and short messages.
Yes. They learn to radio in their GPS coordinates in English. Roussan tells them boats carrying migrants and refugees always need help. But fishermen say some of them refuse it when they realize they're still in Tunisian waters. Most of the time, they're only asking us for directions to Italy, this man says. We tell them it's still very far, that they won't make it, especially when their boats are overloaded and in no shape for the journey. Once I begged them to follow me to the port, but they wanted to carry on. They were convinced Lampedusa was nearby, so I let them go. The next day, a storm broke. The boat capsized. Dozens of bodies washed up on the shores. MSF project coordinator Fouad Gamoudi says fishermen can't always help, and they shouldn't feel it's all on them, but the training empowers locals to do the right thing when they can. A few days after the first workshop, he says, one trainee encountered a boat with 550 Syrians on board. What happened next was a textbook rescue mission.
One fisherman communicated immediately with our boat, and while waiting for the boat to come, it took 4 hours, they stabilized the situation. They took on board the women and children, and everybody was calm when we did the rescue. It was already worth it, all the training we gave to our fishermen.
The MSF folks say they'll continue the workshops until captains of every fishing boat in Tunisia's southern region are trained, creating a safety net of sorts for migrants and refugees at sea. For The World, I'm Marine Olivesi, Ben Garden, Tunisia.
Europe's migrant crisis has gripped our attention for months on the world, but our own hemisphere has an ongoing crisis too. Migrants from Central America still take huge risks to get to the U.S. One big factor pushing them north is rampant gang violence in cities like San Pedro Sula, Honduras, and a lack of protection from local police forces compounds the problem.
In fact, if you talk to a lot of the community members in San Pedro Sula, particularly in hard-hit neighborhoods like Chamelecon, they'll tell you that in years past, what police was there was in many respects as bad as the criminals themselves.
That's Tim Paget with station WLRN in Miami. He was in Honduras recently to report on efforts to build a better police force in the country. The Honduran program puts an emphasis on community policing. The idea is that improved security will encourage more young Hondurans to stay in their country rather than heading north. It's an effort, Paget told me, that's funded in part by the U.S. government.
A big chunk of that would go to this effort to create not just a more professional and modern investigative police force in Honduras, but one that is much more in touch with the community. You mentioned community policing. When you talk to police leaders in Honduras, the one touchstone they keep mentioning is Los Angeles. They're trying to make Los Angeles and the success it had using community policing to confront gangs. They want to make that their model.
Apparently, violent crime in the main cities in Honduras has been decreasing marginally. I don't know, perhaps the changes in the police force and some of the community policing ideas may help explain some of that, but what else is helping?
Well, I think the community policing ideas are very important. A lot of what you're seeing, for example, in neighborhoods like Chamelecon, you're seeing the first police precinct stations that have ever existed there. Thanks to this new program. You're seeing police officers and police commanders on the ground in these neighborhoods being able to make decisions, on their own. You're seeing things that have worked in cities like Los Angeles, like CompStat, using computer-driven statistics on crime to more effectively dispatch patrols. All those sorts of things are really, you can see, are starting to make a difference. I mean, many that in the past few years when I visited Honduras, a lot of times in these neighborhoods, people were not able to go out at night because the gangs themselves, who rule whole districts of cities in Honduras, they would establish curfews, for example. And if you were found by, gangs being out after 8 o'clock, you ran the risk of being killed. What's different now, we did a ride-along with some Honduran National Police in Chamelecon, in one of the areas that used to be just utterly ruled by a gang, the most powerful gang known as MS-13, and you're finally seeing people coming out at night. We've even talked to some business owners who are closing after sundown, something that they hadn't done in years.
Wow, so some progress there, but there's still only one cop in Honduras per 1,200 residents. In Miami, it's one for every 400 residents. So
right, and the UN recommends that you have one for every 300.
Right, so what's the danger of some of these gangs being reversed?
It's a very real danger, and one of the words you keep hearing is reclamación. For example, we visited a house in San Pedro Sula that was known as a Casa Loca, a madhouse. It's where the gang would take victims to be tortured, killed, etc. Last year, a 13-year-old girl was abducted on the streets by one of the gangs because she wouldn't join the gang. So in reprisal, they took her to the madhouse, tortured her, raped her, and killed her. And that became, as tragic as it became sort of a tipping point for the community. And it became a place where a lot of the efforts to create police reform and more community policing was focused. And today, the community has taken over that Casa Loca, that madhouse, as what they call a Casa de Esperanza now. They're turning it, a house of hope. They're turning it into a youth recreation center. They're reclaiming it. And you go all over a city like San Pedro Sula, and you're finding soccer fields that used to be ruled by the gangs, basketball courts, parks, etc. And the police are trying to reclaim these areas, but it's a very tenuous effort so far.
What did younger Hondurans or their families tell you about these efforts? Is it enough to help quell the violence and keep them from fleeing north?
Well, you have to understand, I mean, this is the first time, really, that a lot of these neighborhoods in Honduras are seeing police presence. I mean, one of the reasons we saw tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors on our border last year during that awful migrant surge was because kids in Honduras, really in many neighborhoods, had only two options. They could either be a gang member or a gang victim, or go to the United States. And families in places like this neighborhood I was talking about, where the young girl was killed, families every day were making wrenching decisions about whether to let their kids stay in those neighborhoods and face inevitable violence, or send them on a bus through the perils of Mexico up to the U.S. border. With police presence there now, we talked to one teenager, for example, who was escaping a gang that had threatened him. He got deported back to Honduras earlier this year, but he's decided to stay because he finally feels safe enough in the neighborhood to remain in the country.
Tim Padgett at WLRN in Miami. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Migrant kids who do make the journey to the U.S. are changing our country in some pretty stunning ways. Just consider this. In California, more than 40% of public school students speak a language other than English at home. And while many of those kids learn English at school, their parents often do not. That means a language gap can grow among family members. But in Mountain View, California, some immigrant parents are trying to close that gap. Here's the world's Monica Campbell.
We're going to play in the park.
English as a second language class.
We're going to play in the park.
Quang Deng from Vietnam is here with about 10 other students, all new to America, all parents with young kids. Their teacher, Kit Miller, says the parents are here to try and catch up because their kids are learning English faster than they are.
That's a source of frustration for the parents because they are losing time every day. And every day that they're here, their kids are learning to be Americans. But they don't really have the opportunity to be Americans in the same way that their kids are.
Another reason why they're here is just to ask basic questions at their kids' schools.
The number one question, how is my child behaving?
It's a language gap that can also keep these parents from getting involved with things like the PTA. Patricia Baquedano Lopez, a professor at UC Berkeley School of Education, says schools may communicate in English, but there are more and more non-English speaking families. She drilled this point home recently when she met with a group of immigrant parents. She said to them,
"Do you realize what this means? That your child is the majority student population at the school?" And the mothers were like, "I didn't know that." And they started thinking that none of us is on the PTA, That's right.
Baquedano Lopez does say she is seeing more efforts to integrate immigrant parents. Some schools are holding separate PTA meetings in Spanish, for example, but tight school budgets make efforts like this rare.
It's good for the kids to get outside in nature.
So the pressure falls on parents to learn English, and not until you try and learn English in the U.S. do you realize it's not easy. ESL classes like this at local community centers are vanishing. When state budgets tighten, like California's did during the recession, ESL classes get chopped and don't really come back. It's like this nationwide. Quang Dang's thankful for his ESL class and is improving word by word.
I like to take the kids there every day.
After class, I go with Quang to the preschool to pick up Queenie, his 4-year-old daughter. Quang hangs back, away from the classroom and other parents. Zero interaction. After, we go to Quang's house in a mobile home park. It's close to Google's massive headquarters, but in that short distance, everything changes. It's a heavily immigrant area, and inside his home, I see Quang's wife, Thuy, working at her kitchen table. She's sewing numbers and names on the back of hockey jerseys for the San Jose Sharks, the kind for sale at the stadium's gift shop. I thought this was something done at a factory, but here she was making them, $9 an hour. She studied English once too.
I studied 5 or 6 months, that's it.
But then she stopped.
Because I have the baby.
She had her daughter Queenie and then had to work. The idea now is that her husband, Quang, can try and learn English. It's all worth it because they say Queenie is getting a better education here than in Vietnam. As for Queenie, she's shy about talking to me in English, but does get excited when her dad pulls out the book he's reading for his ESL class, a kid's book. They sit on the couch and practice.
Dog.
Duck.
Cat.
Kid.
They're pretty much at the same level, for now. You know Queenie is going to zoom ahead. And her dad's progress? Well, learning English is getting tougher. The ESL class he was just in got canceled. Tight budgets, not enough students. When I called the other day to see if he'd found another class, he said he hadn't found anything yet, but he's looking. For the World, I'm Monica Campbell, Mountain View, California.
And there's more on this story from Monica in our language podcast, The World in Words. She talks about a former ESL teacher she knows very well, her own father. Listen to The World in Words on iTunes or at pri.org/language.